Hello, everyone. Welcome to the program. We have some big news out at this moment. Miller Lite is trying to give Bud Light a run for its money when it comes to who can be the most PC. Unbelievable. Wait till you see this. It has just been uncovered. And guess what? Shares of TAP, that's the parent company, Molson Coors, which had been doing pretty well up until today, they are trading lower. We're going to get into it. We're also going to get into President Biden's speech that he gave at Howard University over the weekend, which really pushed this whole divisive issue yet again. This is becoming a problem increasingly in this country, as we have seen. And I want to tell you a little bit about Mother's Day and the good, the bad, and the ugly for one particular company, one particular stock, shall we say. Great to have everybody here. Unbelievable. I mean, I'm just like, okay, guys, you know, you kind of had it going pretty well because shares of Anheuser-Busch, AB InBev, they had been trading lower. Actually, they're still lower. They're flat today. They're flat because, you know, executives are like, woohoo, finally, somebody else is feeling the heat. So shares of Bud, they're flat at $61 a share. They had been trading near 67 prior to the whole Dylan Mulvaney scandal. Well, so they're at 61, not great, but not as bad as shares of TAP, which are trading down about 0.6%. We'll check it again. And it's because if anyone's smart, they'll recognize how this is going to affect beer sales. Beer sales over at Miller Lite, which had actually been up like some 13%. Coors Light was actually up 13% too, because you see those two companies are owned by TAP. That would be Molson Coors. And everybody was like, okay, well, I can't drink my Bud Light and I'm not going to drink anything by Anheuser-Busch. So maybe I'll go over here. Well, now that option is being taken off the table, it seems. Wait till you see the commercial. Maybe it's not as bad for some people as the Dylan Mulvaney one, but still, it's really annoying. And what it tells you is that they're all drinking the same Kool-Aid. It's all coming from the same place. And they're all trying to outdo one another because they think there's some audience out there, some magical audience that they just have to have. And so in this particular case, they're using a comedian who I actually wasn't that familiar with, named Ilana Glazer, to talk about how they're turning SHT into so bad into good. Not sure what I can say or not say here on this program, but anyway, you get the point, and then they bleep it out. So let's just watch this and remember, this is Miller Lite at this moment in time, effectively saying, "Hey, bud, hold my beer."
Here's a little known fact: women were among the very first to brew beer ever. From Mesopotamia to the Middle Ages to colonial America, women were the ones doing the brewing. Centuries later, how did the industry pay homage to the founding mothers of beer? They put us in bikinis. Wow. Look at this wild. It's time beer made it up to women. So today, Miller Lite is on a mission to clean up not just their but the whole beer industry's
They really like saying that word now, don't they?
Miller Lite has been scouring the internet for all this and buying it back so that they can turn it into good for women brewers. Literally, good How, you ask? Ladies, take it away.
First, we turn the bad into compost. Then we feed compost to worms. Push out beautiful fertilizer.
That good helps farmers grow quality hops,
which is then donated to women brewers to make their own really good
But there's definitely more out there. In your attic, in the garage, in your parents' basement. Send any you got into Miller Lite, and they'll turn that into good too. Oh. So here's to women, because without us, there would be no beer.
Oh, wait a second. I thought they were going to say something else. Anyway, you get the point. You get the point here. They want you to know that they are all over this, that they are just as woke as anyone else. Now, here's the kicker that many people may not know. It seems that this actually came out before the Dylan Mulvaney ad. In fact, I was looking at the press release that Miller Lite put out, and it is dated, here we go. It is dated, the PR Newswire, from March 7th. 2023. So Dylan Mulvaney was around April 1st. So I think Miller Lite had to have been hoping, that would be TAP, its parent company, Molson Coors, had to have been hoping that nobody would actually see this, right? Nobody, like, this would not be discovered. But so many of you, I'll tell you, because you're writing in on comments, and I'm going to get to your comments in just a second because this is a live program. I am here with you. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure you come on over to YouTube. Just subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, because we do these live shows. And I love hearing from you all. You had actually warned that Molson Coors was no angel in this department and was struggling with its own issues, as we can clearly see. So they, again, want to make this bid to be PC. Look, I'm sorry, but it's funny to me that somehow, and again, and I say this, obviously, I'm well-educated. I'm an intellectual. I was also in the Miss America pageant, right? So let's just, deal with, I don't have as big an issue, perhaps, as some people with the idea that you're using a woman to market a product. And yes, she has a kind of sex appeal. I'm not as offended, shall we just say. And I consider myself a feminist in the truest sense of the word, but I'm not as offended by that just naturally. I'm kind of like, yeah, all right, men like pretty women. Women actually like to look at pretty women. They'll say, oh, she's pretty. And maybe that helps sell the beer. In fact, actually, we know it helps sell the beer for whatever reason. That's why they have the Coors Light girls, or the Bud Light girls, or the Silver Bullet girls, right? That dress up in the near cheerleading costumes. So it is what it is, right? And it's kind of like, okay, everybody kind of just needs to get over themselves and sell some beer. At least that's how I would approach it as an investor. I wouldn't be saying, okay, how can I court this group, or how can I court that group? And yet that's exactly what these marketing executives, funny enough, another woman actually over at this particular company. Let me share with you her quote. The Alyssa, I can never say her name, so I'm not even going to try. But this is somebody else who came up with this whole idea of turning bad into good, whatever, saying that it was for this Women's History Month. This would be the senior director of marketing for Miller Lite, Elizabeth Hitch, who said this Women's History Month, Miller Lite wanted to recognize that without women, there would be no beer. To honor this, we wanted to acknowledge the missteps in representation of women in beer advertising by cleaning up not just our, but the whole industries, while benefiting the future of women in beer. No, I'm sorry. You know what you guys want to do? You want to sell beer. And by the way, that's all you should care about, is selling the darn beer. Instead, you're distracted by all this nonsense that's coming from the ESG community, trying to tell you that you're supposed to value social whatever and climate whatever over actually just making money and selling your product and respecting your customers. It is why we heard the other marketing executive over at Bud Light say this.
I'm a businesswoman. I had a really clear job to do when I took over Bud Light. And it was, this brand is in decline. It's been in decline for a really long time. And if we do not attract young drinkers to come and drink this brand, there will be no future for Bud Light. So I had this super clear mandate. It's like, we need to evolve and elevate this incredibly iconic brand. And what I brought to that was a belief in, okay, what does evolve and elevate mean? It means
hi, impressive carrying skills, right?
Evolve,
I got some Bud Lights for us.
Inclusivity.
So I kept hearing about this thing called March Madness, and I thought we were all just having a hectic month, but it turns out it has something to do with sport.
To the point where you lose your parent company, what is it up to now? $5 billion in market cap? How do you feel about that as a shareholder? If you own shares in this company, there's only one lonely analyst that had the courage to actually come out and say, hey, maybe this is a hold. Maybe don't buy this stock. I mean, he didn't have enough courage to actually come out and say, sell it. I would have sold it like the first day this whole thing happened, because you could just see it was the train had already left the station. People were going to be mad. It may not be as offensive to see this particular
Here's a little known fact. Women were among the very first to brew beer ever. From Mesopotamia to the Middle Ages to colonial...
However, it shows you they're all cut from the same darn cloth. This actually speaks to a much bigger issue of what's going on nationwide. This sort of, we've got to just change it all up, because if we don't, gosh, could we actually see a Donald Trump get elected? I mean, this is the underpinnings of this. Don't kid yourself. They're all political. This isn't about selling beer. It's about something else entirely. If it were about selling beer, then you know what? You're going to put the cute girls in the shorts and t-shirts, and you're going to do the all-American commercials, and you're going to cater to that audience that loves your beer. You're not going to try and repel them like these people are doing. But the reason this is happening is because it's really not about selling beer. It's not about earning money for shareholders. It's about changing the world into something that is, in some ways, just not what we are right now, right? I mean, that's pretty clear. So Dylan Mulvaney gets to be super feminine, but the women in the other commercial, they're using the tough language, the swears. They're the, tough ladies who are saying, we're going to turn the bad into good. And it's just sort of this weird moment where you can't be feminine if you're actually a woman, but you can be feminine if you just want to say you are. I mean, come on. But this is hand in hand, you see, with the pitting against each other that this administration is actually all about. Because you see, they have no policy. They really don't. They have no policy. Look at what just happened at the border. Look at what's going on overseas right now. People are dying. We are spending a ton of money. Look at what's happening in our country in terms of inflation. Prices are still up 4.9% from where they were a year ago. Look at what's happening from a crime perspective. We're arresting a Marine, a former Marine, 24-year-old guy in New York City because he was trying to protect people and himself from a homeless man that was mentally ill and threatening people. And because it's not okay to actually have police out there policing the streets in New York City anymore, somehow now innocent citizens are getting put in harm's way. They're taking matters into their hand and in their own hands. And then they are the ones that are going to be possibly thrown in jail. I mean, he's looking at 15 years in jail. By the way, the GoFundMe account for Mr. Penny, Daniel Penny, is now upwards of $2 million. So people get it. People get it. Unless, of course, you're a politician like Joe Biden. He gets it in a different way, guys. This is really scary because they are trying very deliberately to pick a group, that would be, I guess, white men, right? And demonize them in a way that is, I think, going to lead to some scary stuff. I want to share with you the outrageous sound from Joe Biden speaking at Howard University this weekend. Just incredibly awful stuff. Before I get to that, just a really quick note from our wonderful sponsor there over at Legacy PM Investments, one of our very first sponsors in the show from the very, very beginning. If you're looking to buy gold or silver right now, I know a lot of you certainly have been in light of some of the recent economic challenges that may be with us for a while. If this is something you're interested in, I'd give them a call. They're really wonderful. You are, of course, welcome to use my name. I know these guys really well. 1-866-589-0560. LegacyPMInvestments.com is the website. And like I said, they can walk you through it. You can actually just buy or sell it right there online as well, if you prefer that. But they do have a terrific sales team. So if you're looking to buy gold or silver, silver's a little cheaper, LegacyPMInvestments.com. Do go there. Do check them out. But let me share with you now the sound from the President of the United States. I mean, the rhetoric is so unbelievably irresponsible. Irresponsible. Here he is.
I signed the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. It's the largest investment in climate, environmental justice, and conservation ever, anywhere, period.
Okay, wrong sound. That was bad too. Only because it was wrong. The Inflation Reduction Act, give me a break. Inflation, increase act. I mean, that's all that was. Anyway, here we go. Howard University, Joe Biden over the weekend.
We know that American history has not always been a fairy tale. From the start, it's been a constant push and pull for more than 240 years between the best of us, the American ideal that we're all created equal, and the worst of us, the harsh reality that racism has long torn us apart. It's a battle that's never really over. But on the best days, enough of us have the guts and the hearts to stand up for the best in us. To choose love over hate, unity over disunion, progress over retreat. To stand up against the poison of white supremacy, as I did my inaugural address, to single out as the most dangerous terrorist threat to our homeland is white supremacy.
Okay. All right. So you understand what he's doing there. He said the most dangerous threat to our homeland is white supremacy. I mean, okay. Look, I'm just going to say this. I know we're not perfect. Yes, America still has pockets of racism. For some people, it's still, it's a challenging thing. But I will say this. This is still a country where opportunity is pretty plentiful, where pretty much we take things at face value. I mean, aside from, the marketing departments over at some of the beer companies, we're all capitalists and therefore opportunists and thus motivated for similar reasons, which is why I do not see America fundamentally as a racist country, like he wants you to believe. There may be bad spots. We know there are bad spots, but Americans, by and large, we are a pretty accepting, kind, altruistic even group of people that want to succeed. We want to succeed for ourselves. We want to succeed for our families. We want to succeed for our communities. We have had a Black president united. The States of America. You've had a president Barack Obama, who was elected not once, but twice. So when you start to tell me that fundamentally we are a racist country and that white supremacy is the biggest threat right now, I'm sorry. You're just taking it way too far. But I think they're doing this very deliberately because they want to basically cut the legs out from under an entire class of people. An entire group of people. Consider what's happening in San Francisco right now. There is a committee, a reparations task force that was put into place, and they have decided that every Black Californian must have $360,000, minimum of $360,000 in a one-time payout. That's the starting price. It goes up to $1.2 million. It would cost the state $800 billion that the state doesn't have. I mean, this is just bizarre, okay? This is really bizarre. Again, in a country where we don't guarantee outcomes, but we do a pretty good job at making sure everybody has equal opportunity. This is the reason, why we have people from all over the world that want to come to the United States of America, that want the chance to do well here. Why? Because this is the place that actually does value you on your merits. This is a meritocracy. This is not a fundamentally racist country. White supremacy, for him to talk about that, it's like they're deliberately trying to pit everyone against one another. And that's what you're seeing going on in New York City right now, where this 24-year-old Marine happened to be on a subway. A guy was getting out of hand. And because, it's awful what happened. Believe me, it's awful. I'm sure he didn't mean for that to happen. I'm sure he was frightened. But I want to know, where are the cops that are supposed to be on the train preventing people that might be schizophrenic, that might have mental disorders, from intimidating other people? I mean, we've had a number of situations with people actually being killed in New York City this year with similar circumstances. So understandably, everyone's scared. Everyone's scared to ride the subway. And when you have that level of fear, it's not about, well, was he looking at the guy and saying, oh, what's the color of his skin? He was looking, most likely, again, we'll see how it all shakes. He's probably looking at the guy saying, wow, he's a threat. And nobody's here to help us. Because, well, who wants to be a police officer in New York City right now? I'll tell you, that's one thankless job. You can't even do your job. And now that DA, politically motivated DA, we've seen that, right? You have only to look at all the things that they're bringing up against the former president. Pretty banana republic-like, if you ask me. Anyway, we've seen that. And then this DA is trying to, throw the guy behind bars for 15 years? Why isn't anybody policing the streets? Why isn't anybody taking the homeless person and getting him some help so he's not intimidating everybody on the train? I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here. And there's a lot of stuff to unpack. It's just bad. On top of all that, we got word today that John Brennan, the former CIA guy that wanted you to believe that Trump dossier was absolutely positively real, even though yours truly read it and was like, gee, this doesn't look like an intelligence document. This looks like, I don't know, opposition research. I mean, the thing was just so tawdry, and the way it read, it was like, it's a spoon feed to some tabloid somewhere. I'm like, this doesn't read like an intelligence document at all. Like, it's kind of obvious. And yet, Brennan insisted this was the real deal, that Trump was an agent of the Russians, et cetera, et cetera. But it gets worse. He just testified and he admitted that actually that whole thing they did with the 51 former spies and political hacks, that was actually, quote, political. So he admits it was political. Well, we knew it was political. But what's so sad is that you have all these intelligence officials banding together, allegedly at the request of our current Secretary of State. That would be Secretary Antony Blinken, who's not doing a very good job, frankly, as Secretary of State. Anyway, he's the guy who apparently called up Mike Morrell and said, hey, can we put this together? And Mike Morrell said, sure, let me see who I can get on board. And so then there's now an email, and the New York Post has published all of this. You see the email of Brennan talking to Mike Morrell. I mean, this is not good. And the upshot of all this, do not forget, was that you had the New York Post losing its Twitter account. You had basically a suppression of that story, unlike anything we've ever seen. And it turns out the spin was actually coming from our own former members of the Intelligence Department. There's some concern and questions as to whether there were current members of the Intelligence Department involved with that as well. So I think we have a lot of questions to ask, and we have to say, like, what is going on? Why are they trying to do all this? Well, it's a jockeying of power, right? They all want power. When Antony Blinken was asked about this, he went on CBS recently. He said that, he's not political. He would never do something like that because he's not political. Excuse-moi? Excuse me, Mr. Blinken, you were actually working for the Biden campaign as an advisor. So that tells me you are maybe just a little bit political, right? Like you try and pretend you're like over there on an island there at the State Department, but you were working for the darn campaign. And we're not supposed to believe Mike Morrell when he said it was your idea? I wonder. Anyway, this is turning into some alarming stuff. Alarming in that I fear it's going to get much, much worse before it gets better. And you have to say, like, why is this happening now? What is really going on? I don't know. I want to take some questions, and then I want to tell you about a company that I'm not so happy with. definitely not psychic. Kind of like ruined my Mother's Day. I'll fill you in on that. Anyway, I'm reading from MJ here. Good to see you again, MJ, by the way. Very good to see you. Beer can be repurposed by distilleries. That may not be a bad investment just now. And then, of course, I'm hearing from a lot of you that are saying, okay, well, thank you. Somebody out there in defense of me. I appreciate that. I'm just trying to read these in real time here. Bud Light should have gotten Blair White instead of that dude. Look, I think that they made a mistake. But whether or not Bud Light can really recover from this mistake remains to be seen. I realize that the CEO of the company feels frustrated, is angry, fired basically. I mean, they said put on leave those 2 employees that were responsible for the marketing there. But, ultimately it's going to come back to him, and whether it's fair or not, I mean, he calls it misinformation. I think misinformation is just one more sort of smack in the face to all those Bud Light drinkers, right? Because, or Anheuser-Busch in general. This is a big company with a whole lot of beers, just like Molson Coors is. I mean, I said the other day, the interesting thing about Molson Coors was that it offered that trade for a lot of people that didn't want to drink Bud Light. They then had the Molson Coors alternative. Well, now a lot of you now don't have that one anymore. Again, I'm just checking the stock right now to see if it's recovered at all. No, it's still down about 0.6%. So this is a stock that had fared quite well over the course of the last month, really quite well. And now, is seeing a little bit of a hiccup. And whether or not this lasts, we'll see. Again, I don't think the commercial is going to quite ignite the fury that the other one did, but it's still indicative of where these companies are actually at. And the reason they're at where they are is because of environmental social governance. And I could talk about this all day because I actually think it's a huge mistake that we're not actually putting first and foremost the market itself. Instead, we're getting distracted by thinking about all these other things that don't really have anything to do with a company doing well. In fact, it's a very socialist style system, or worse than that, really totalitarian, if you would. In fact, Larry Fink was on Bloomberg several years ago talking about how, it's okay because investors actually, they like the totalitarian kind of, top-down, rule-oriented system. It's actually good for markets. No, it's not good for markets. The reason we are who we are, the reason the United States of America enjoys a higher standard of living, the reason why we have the world's largest economy in the world is because of capitalism. So if you destroy capitalism in an effort to be more equitable and in an effort to be more fair and in an effort to basically check all the boxes that BlackRock wants you to check, then what are you really going to be left with? Because if we are not, I got news for you guys, if we are not the hegemonic power of the world, who will be? China? You okay with that? I'm not. It's certainly not going to be Europe. Who else wants that gig? It would be China. It would be Russia, but they don't have the strength economically in order to do that or to support that. But if we're not careful, if we're like, yeah, we don't care about making money, we just want to make sure that we're representative of anyone and everything, then our priorities are not properly aligned for success. Really. I mean, go around the world, look at it. Every single time they've tried this socialist, which turns inevitably into a kind of communist system, it fails. It fails because they forget that we're all just human. And so maybe the pretty girls in the bikinis sell the beer. Maybe people don't want Dylan Mulvaney effectively shoved down their throat, and they don't want to be told you are not the kind of people that we want drinking our beer because this is really the one. I mean, this is weird. It's weird. It's like they just don't care about things that they ought to care about anymore. And I think that as a result, we really risk much larger problems. This is why I think it's important that we sound the alarm on ESG. And a lot of you are like, okay, first of all, what is ESG? I went through it. It's like the set of rules. But the other thing you're asking is, how do I know if ESG is really governing my portfolio? And I would say, first of all, it is, right? Like every single fund manager now in the world has to like look at their screen and say, okay, can I invest in this? Because that's part of the equation. There literally are stocks that you cannot invest in. I have a friend who's running an energy fund. He's like, what the heck? Like in March 2020, like Exxon was down in the dumps. And he's like, wait, I can't invest. I can't pour money into Exxon because the rules, right? The ESG rules do not like Exxon because it's a traditional energy company. I mean, you see where this is going. If you're not going to invest in the traditional energy company, if the free market is telling you, you have to invest in this because this is what the government wants, well, then what happens to our free market? And if we don't have a free market, we don't have a capitalist foundation, then all the opportunity that I'm talking about that makes this country so great, all that opportunity goes away. Poof. And so again, when Biden tries to pit one group against another and tries to blame, I don't even like saying the words. You heard him. I mean, we can play it again. I don't really want to, but you know where he's going. I mean, that is so divisive. We thought that Barack Obama was going to be able to pull this country together, right? I mean, that was the hope. That was the idea at the time. Let's bring everyone together. You know, it was proof, I believe, that America is not a racist place. We elected a black president twice. And yet, instead of bringing us together, that was used, race was used and manipulated and used to pit people against one another in an extraordinarily harmful way. And it's being done more and more and more. And I would say, I'll also say this, like both sides are guilty of it. It's not like it's just, I do think the left uses it more, but you know, here I am saying this is wrong. And somebody's going to say, oh, well, that's wrong that she's doing this and, you know, put me in some other camp. Let me just tell you, I don't like this. I don't like where our country is heading. I think that we have a responsibility to our children and to future generations to really honor Martin Luther King Jr. and to remember all that he said. And the idea is you don't see color. You don't see race. You see a person, a human being that's loved by God. And if Joe Biden and the Democrats don't want to see that, then we're heading towards a very destructive, dangerous period. And then you get all the economic stuff on top of it, right? How do I turn the corner from that? I mean, that's kind of a buzzkill, right? No pun intended. But it's you know, we're talking about beer, but it's actually bigger, broader than that. There are other forces here that are coming into being, and it's all so selfishly motivated, so driven by these politicians' desire to gin up support and make this group angry against this group. I mean, Joe Biden, let's be honest, doesn't really have a chance in 2024 because the economy is a mess. And by the way, it's going to get worse because, hey, the Federal Reserve, I don't know how they're going to deal with this because you're looking at lots more inflation in the coming months, 4.9% of an increase in inflation right now. I'd even say it's actually worse than that, only because if you look at inflation, say, on an apples-to-apples basis with where inflation was back in the late 70s, they changed the metrics in the 80s, so they don't account for any of this in the same way. I actually think you're looking at, on a 1978 adjusted basis, somewhere in the vicinity of probably 10% increase in consumer prices. And it's hurting middle America. It's hurting middle America really, really hard. And so he knows that. His party knows that. They know that he's old. They know that he, like, look, I'm not an ageist, but 80, you're getting up there. And he's not a young 80 at that, right? Like, let's just, call a spade a spade. This is a guy who's a very, very old 80. So he would have a tough time. I think what they say is going to be 86 when he leave office. He might have a tough time making it all the way through. And so who've they got in the wings? Kamala Harris. We'll get to her in just a second. But think about how challenging it is for him politically. There was a poll that just came out from Washington Post, ABC News, and it showed that no one really wants him to run. Like, no one. And it also showed that Americans are scoring Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis way higher on all of these policy issues that matter. So Joe Biden has no policy. Because he has no policy, he's going back to the well of dangerous stuff. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Like, we are so much better than that. We were at a point where we were getting beyond all that. They're like trying to take us back. Again, going back to San Francisco, where Gavin Newsom, who would love to be running as the Democrat nominee for president, although good luck to him. I mean, he looks younger. He's got that going for him. He's not especially bright, really not like the most gifted mind, shall we say. That said, he's a politician. And because he's a politician, when his reparations task force comes forward and said it's a minimum of $360,000 for every Black Californian, up to $1.2 million in reparations that they need to get, instead of like sitting them down and saying, okay, like this is, we got to move forward. We have to. I mean, look, I'm a woman. I didn't get to vote for a long time. Like my whole, like women didn't get to vote. Women still don't have equal pay. Are we doing anything about, am I going to get $360,000 or $1.2 million? No. This is a direct attempt to divide us and to buy more votes. And so Gavin Newsom, being the politician that he is, was first presented with this. And he's like, no, this isn't going to work. Well, he just changed his tune. And he's like, okay, it's on the table. Everything's on the table. There's another part of this task force memo where they also said they want to give Black people priority in renting and buying properties. They said that they should have the veto power, that a state agency should have the veto power over real estate decisions to lessen racial segregation. I think that has to do with sort of local districts that say, okay, you know what, this is like a fancy neighborhood, so we're not going to put apartment style housing here. And they want to say, no, like that's not acceptable. The state has the right to come in. I guess I'm kind of simple. I'm a limited government kind of gal. So I would prefer that local communities have the right to govern themselves as they have previously in California. The other thing is that they want to repeal, this was buried in their task force whatever, folder or file, Prop 209, which was a voter-approved law that banned preferential treatment for minority groups applying to state colleges and state government jobs. And that happened, I believe, back in like 1996 or 1997. And they want to get rid of that. Look, we have a tough history, right, as a country. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. And yet we did the right thing. And I would just say that at some point, yes, it's bad, but there are ways to move on. And it's not through handouts. It's through offering more in the way of education, better government, and lower taxes, right? I mean, give people the power to prosper. Give them the opportunity. But when you've got communities like Chicago, you go to the south side of Chicago and you get so much violence on the streets, and it's being run by a mayor who won't recognize this, but still goes back to the same well that Joe Biden keeps going to. Well, you're not doing anything to help the lives of people. Those were kids that were out of school longer than most. It was, unfortunately, a lot of these poor urban communities that were out of school the longest after March 2020, that these communities suffered the most because those kids didn't have computers at home and computer savvy parents and printers where they could print their stuff. So they're not helping the people. They're not providing more opportunity. It's just an accumulation of power. And it's sad to see. And I worry. I worry for the country. Great to have you guys all here. I do want to say that I'm going to take a minute and just look at some of your comments here as we're on this live program here on Monday afternoon. And I can see all of you writing in, and I appreciate it. We've got quite a few people tuning in. You know, the channel's growing. That's the good news, right? We've been growing quite a bit. So many of you have found me. And I think that's in part because of, well, some shakeups over at my former employer. What do you know, right? Tucker Carlson leaving the 8 o'clock slot there over at Fox. And I think a lot of people have said, you know what, I'm going to look for something different. I'm going to look for something new. And this is perfect timing because this is the future. I believe that. It is very much the future. I like this. Live free or die. I like your handle. Or your channel name, Live Free or Die. I once wanted to call my show that, actually. Actually, it says it right here on the mug. What do you know? Live Free or Die. It's a great, great saying, and it's got a tremendous history. It's actually originated, I believe, over in France, and it was part of the French Revolution, et cetera. But anyway, Live Free or Die is a motto that I grew up with in the great state of New Hampshire, where there's no sales tax, no income tax, and I do believe they just got rid of cap gains tax as well. So real estate prices are going up. Everybody wants to move or retire to New Hampshire. But listen, I mean, that's my kind of state. And they have Live Free or Die on every single license plate. So pretty good place. Live Free or Die, I appreciate your comment. Just sell the beer. Sell the beer, all right? But they can't just sell the beer. And that is inherently what is so wrong right now. They can't just sell the beer, and they can't just sell the beer because there's all these other forces at play. Forces, which, by the way, and Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running for president, he would tell you this. He came out with a book. I interviewed him when he first came out with the book. It was just tremendous. I had him on the show the other day again. And I had his co-founder at Strive on recently. He was a former executive at Anheuser-Busch. So he's watching this whole thing, train wreck unfold. He had some great things to say about that. You should check out the interview. Anston Frericks, who's over at Strive Asset Management. But what Vivek talked about was something called Woke Inc. In other words, they're laughing all the way to the bank. They're trying to recreate capitalism in kind of a socialist, communist style, a totalitarian style, where they make all the decisions. And by the way, they profit from all of these gains, right? They get to pick the company you're invested in. But as I started to say, while you're asking, well, what is ESG and why is this happening right now and what's really going on? Well, there's one asset manager in the world that's a really big deal. I mean, they control more than half the size of US GDP, and that would be BlackRock. And they made a commitment, a decision that they wanted to make sure that everybody had this certain kind of governance at a corporation. So instead of like just focusing on selling your product, you now have to focus on your ESG rating. Because if you don't have a good ESG rating, well, no one's going to be able to invest in your stock. Or so they think. I mean, I still think that the market has a funny way of working these things. That's why you want to be ahead of the ESG crowd. You want to actually be able to see through them with laser focus to know how wrong they are on lots of stuff. So they've got this whole sort of scheme going, and it's recently come under, just in the last year, a lot of fire, right? Because if you don't have a market that's going up, 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 if it gets more challenging, as we saw certainly on the S&P last year, and it's kind of dicey still this year, if you don't have just this up, up, and away momentum, suddenly people get a little bit picky. And suddenly investors, they care about earnings. Gosh, darn, earnings. And if your earnings aren't good, then you're not going to be able to attract more investors. And so some people have referred to it as a little bit of a Ponzi scheme. You got this big company calling all the shots, and it just trickles down everywhere else. And so people say, well, what can I do? How do I know if like somehow this is affecting my portfolio? I can tell you it probably is affecting your portfolio. If you have a 401k, for example, unless you're out there buying your own individual stocks and picking your own individual stocks, most likely you have some element of ESG in your overall portfolio and in your savings. And it's hard to escape from. It's hard to get away from. But some states are being really proactive about it. I actually commend Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, for the actions that he has taken. And Kansas has also taken some action. Texas, some, but not to the extent of, say, Florida and Kansas. And I think ultimately you're going to have states all around the country say, listen, we want returns. Because you know what? Someday our employees, that taught in school or were policing our streets or fighting our fires, all of our employees need to retire. And if your ESG stuff is just one big house of cards, because nobody seemed to remember that companies actually need to earn money in order to continue attracting investment, that's kind of how it works, well then we're going to have a problem, right? Because then the states are going to be on the hook. How are you going to pay all those retiree benefits out? And then, even if you're not in a union or getting this pension fund or working for the state, you still probably want to make sure that you're going to be okay one day when you retire. You got enough of a complication with some of the long-term trajectory issues in terms of our economic fundamentals and the $31.4 trillion worth of debt that we have. By the way, Biden doesn't care about that. I didn't hear him talking about that at Howard. No, like the unbelievable. Like none of these people have any substance. They just keep reverting to a really dangerous well of rhetoric that is not good. Not good. Anyway, so we got bad long-term economic fundamentals. So yeah, if you want to retire someday, you want to make sure that your investments are actually going to produce, which means that the companies actually have to earn money, which means that this whole, let's value them because are they proper from a social standpoint, from a climate standpoint? Like none of that really matters when you're just trying to pay your bills. So we've had like a lot of nonsense in there, and I just think it's time to kind of square that away. I'm reading. Oh, my good friend Leslie is joining us. I say my good friend because she's my friend over on Locals, which is another platform I'm on at trishregan.locals.com. It was actually started by Dave Rubin, who was on the show a few weeks ago. Maybe you know him from the Rubin Report. And it's another platform where we can speak very, very freely. And Leslie is one of the subscribers over there. So I always like to give her a shout out. It's good to see you. And she always has interesting information, such as $171 billion from BlackRock. You're seeing Texas did that. I just spoke with the Texas AG maybe about, 2 weeks ago. And I know he had sent a letter to Larry Fink at BlackRock, and he wanted to do this. I don't know as they've gone so far, but I could be wrong, Leslie. I'll have to look that up. He did tell me that they wanted to do that. Oh, Alex, you're sweet. You want the mug? It's signed by me, actually, too. I keep drinking my water. That's how you know this is live, guys. You know it's live. I have to keep stopping to drink my water because there's no commercial breaks. Like my whole career, you had a chance to have a glass of water. Anyway, the mug, I'm glad that you like it. It's an important expression to me. I'm actually trying to figure out how to put it up here so that you guys can see it and look at it actually on the page. But other than that, I'll type in the store just so you have it. It's actually trishregan.store where we have them designed by yours truly. Anyway, so yeah, Live Free or Die has been it's meant a lot to me. Always. So I love that you're all here. And I think that part of the reason you all came here was because you started looking for more things. I've also been far more proactive about being here just over the last month, doing these lives, for example. I enjoy them, and it's a good chance to talk with all of you. And at some point, we're going to get an official time down just, I'm going to work out my schedule. I'm a busy lady too. So I would love to, we'll just have a set time when we can meet. All the more reason to hit the bell in the meantime, just so that when in fact I am here. But I've been producing a lot more content. We've had a lot of interviews that we're putting out, and I would suspect that there's somewhere probably around 10 or 12 pieces of content aside from the live show every single day. So that's all helped, and you guys have been sharing it, and you've been commenting on it. If you put anything in the comments below, please know that I do actually read them all. So careful. I do read them all, and I appreciate them. I've heard from so many of you with just some really interesting information and some great stories, and I do indeed enjoy that. So go woke, go broke, one of you is writing, and isn't that the truth? Let's take a look at, has anybody been watching Nike? I was interested to see that recently they've been facing a little bit more of a challenge. And I think that part of that, I don't know if it's entirely attributable to the Dylan Mulvaney thing. I was surprised that more women did not speak out on that entire issue. The guy's marketing a sports bra. Forgive me. Dylan Mulvaney is marketing a sports bra. And the company's trading down again today, about 0.5%. I would say over the last 5 days, it's had some challenges. It was up near $126 a share, trading right now at $119. So a fair loss there. And much of this is because people are anticipating that there will be a slowdown in consumer spending. I do think it's more than that over at Nike. I do think that the culture war here is catching up with them. I've told you, look, I'm not going to buy Nike sneakers anymore. I don't need to give them my money. I don't need to buy any more tennis skirts. Thank you very much. And a lot of you recommended Puma. I'll have to look at that one more closely. You all love Puma sneakers. But as I look at this, Hershey was another one. So Coca-Cola, ticker symbol KO, Nike, NKE, Hershey, HSY, all of these companies are just getting themselves in the middle of this in ways that are really, I believe, ultimately going to be detrimental to their brand, because now every time you think about having a Hershey's chocolate, like all these other things come into your head. Every time you want to have a Bud Light, you're like, they can't even give it away. You guys were writing to me about that as well. And of course, I've seen a lot of stories, but anecdotally, you have been talking about how, you're at a party or something, or you're somewhere and they can't give it away. Like, people will drink water before they will drink Bud Light. So now the question becomes, what happens to Miller Lite and Coors Light for that matter? Because that's all the same brand over there at TAP. As they get into this culture war, as they go into the, go woke, go broke thing. One of you writing, you could just buy Scottish whiskey. Yeah. Just go straight to the hard stuff. Who needs beer anyway? I'm wondering, were they trying to get more women? They must have wanted to try and get more women with that commercial. Let me just play a little clip of it again for you guys.
Here's a little known fact. Women were among the very first to brew beer
We're talking
ever.
About this new
From Mesopotamia to the Middle Ages to colonial America, women were the ones doing the brewing. Centuries later, how did the industry pay homage to the founding mothers of beer? They put us in bikinis. Wow. Look at this wild. It's time beer made it up to women. So today, Miller Lite is on a mission to clean up not just their but the whole beer industry's Miller Lite has been scouring the internet for all this and buying it back so that they can turn it into good for women brewers. Literally, good How, you ask? Ladies, take it away.
First, we turn the bad into compost. Then we feed compost to worms. Push out beautiful fertilizer.
That good helps farmers grow quality hops,
which is then donated to women brewers to make their own really good
But there's definitely more out there. In your attic, in the garage, in your parents' basement. Send any you got into Miller Lite, and they'll turn that into good too. Oh. So here's to women, because without us, there would be no.
Okay. All right. So, that's their shtick. It's all a gimmick. It's all just so they want to expand their audience, their consumer base. They want women to drink beer too. The timing for them, though, is just incredibly unfortunate because this came out just a few weeks before the Dylan Mulvaney thing. And I think the Dylan Mulvaney thing got everybody kind of revved up, and it brought the ESG nonsense into clear focus. And so now people are like, all right, I want a company that represents my values. And so they were turning to Molson Coors, which has brands like Coors Light and Miller Lite, in hopes that, okay, well, this is a company that represents my values. And that is clearly something that might be now up for dispute. So this is bad. We're getting some news that's crossing right now. This is coming to us from the Wall Street Journal. Breaking news: an assailant armed with a baseball bat attacked 2 staffers at Virginia Representative Jerry Conley's office. The staff members were taken to the hospital. The attacker went to the congressman's Fairfax office and asked for him. This again, according to the Wall Street Journal, it's just breaking right now. Representative Jerry Connolly of Virginia saying that someone armed with a baseball bat Monday morning asked the congressman in his Fairfax office before asking 2 members of his staff for him. And then they are apparently in the hospital in non-life-threatening condition, and the attacker is in police custody. So that's not good. Not good, obviously. But again, where's our security? Like, how is it that some guy with a baseball bat can just burst in to Capitol Hill, into this guy's office? I mean, that's a question. Right? If we need the security, we ought to have the security. And it's important, right? Like, it's important. We have to protect our lawmakers. Our lawmakers, who I wonder if they have ESG portfolios. This is one that really, you want to get me mad? Apparently, they are not subject to the same kind of insider trading rules that you and I are subject to. In fact, I mean, this is why Senator Hawley is trying to introduce this as quote unquote Nancy Pelosi Act, right? Because the idea is you shouldn't have all this information because you're sitting on a committee and you're just entrenched in this and you're talking to executives and you're talking to policymakers, and then you go out and you move your stock portfolio around and you make money on it ahead of some policy getting announced. I mean, that's sort of not okay. And I don't know why the SEC doesn't go after that. And yet, these guys get a pass. And they were probably buying all the ESG stocks before some of this ESG stuff really went through, right? I mean, because this is sort of how it's working. I think that Americans' frustration with all of this sort of corruption, if you would, is reaching a tipping point. And that is why you have so many Americans saying that they just don't have any more faith in our institutions. There's no faith in the Oval Office. There's no faith in Capitol Hill. There's no faith in the Federal Reserve or in the Treasury Department, which is why for the first time ever, and like, look, we go here every year. Oh, we're going to default. We got to raise the debt ceiling. And, the whole system's going to collapse and we will no longer be the world's reserve currency, et cetera, et cetera. You got Janet Yellen just the other day sounding like Chicken Little. But, in some ways this time it's different. And it's different because of the guy that's in the Oval Office. Here's Janet Yellen, his Treasury Secretary, on Friday, I believe this was.
The president set out a detailed budget. In that budget, he invests in America. He cuts wasteful and inefficient spending and lowers deficits over 10 years by $3 trillion. But so he and I regard it as a fiscally responsible proposal. The Republicans have very different ideas. They want to focus on cutting spending, and the proposals that they've set out would entail draconian cuts and really end the policies we've put in place to invest in our economy in clean energy.
Okay. All right. So she's worried. She's worried. Look, I don't think it's going to happen. Let me check the price of gold, actually. I will check it as we speak here. Looking at gold right now, it's been just climbing incredibly this year, more than I actually would have thought. And it's in part because we have so much dysfunction. I mean, you look at shares of GLD, which is how it's traded. It's an ETF. They're at 187.16. I think that the reality is that people are saying, hang on, like these guys are that messed up. They're that messed up that they could actually do something enormously stupid. I don't think they'll do something that stupid, but I think the fact that Joe Biden has not been willing to even hint in any way, shape, or form that he might give an inch. I mean, he has started from the get-go saying, no, we want a clean debt ceiling. We're not gonna cut any spending whatsoever. And Janet Yellen being trotted out to CNBC to say, can you believe they want to cut our green energy stuff? This is our whole policy. This is our whole initiative. Well, you know, if you don't have the money for it, dare I say, you might actually want the market to come around to that way of thinking, right? Like if you're going to have all these green energy initiatives, then you should be looking for market input. Speaking of green, it brings me to another one of our great sponsors here on the program, Rough Greens. This would be a supplement that I give my dog, Fluffy. Yeah, that's his name. And it's a he. You see? I'm pretty progressive, right? Anyway, Fluffy, who is very fluffy, is a cute little Maltese that I have, and I feed him Rough Greens every day because it's like his vitamin. I mean, I take my vitamins, he takes his, and it was created by a Vietnam-era helicopter pilot, Dr. Dennis Black, who is a naturopathic doctor, and he's got 2 big dogs, and he wanted to make sure that they were healthy, and he came up with this, and it's wonderful. I have seen a real difference in my dog. He's fluffier than ever, and he's eating really well, and he hasn't had the allergies he's had in the past. I mean, he can't talk, although sometimes I think he can. He can't talk, but I'm pretty sure he's in way better shape. And you know what? Just I feel better. I feel better knowing that this is the good stuff and that he's got all the vitamins that he needs to have a long, healthy life. So you can get your free jumpstart trial of Rough Greens as well. All you have to do is go to roughgreens.com/Trish. It's for friends of my program. If you have a little pup, definitely try it out. And by the way, send me a picture. Send me a picture of your dog. You can put it in the comments below. I do love seeing those. But listen, guys, I mean, we just have so much going on right now. And the hold my beer thing from Miller Lite to Bud Light, this is going to go down in the history books. I mean, I think that this just symbolizes everything that's wrong with this woke capitalism, with ESG investing, and this sort of totalitarian view of markets. Markets are markets. And the reason markets work is because of capitalism. And we don't need to go into Econ 101, but I'll tell you, Joe Biden would have benefited from it. Larry Fink is no fool over at BlackRock. This is good for him. This is good for Larry. It's good for BlackRock. All of these companies are trying to do what's good for them. But in that process, because they're so individually focused, they are losing out on what's good for America, what's good for individuals, what's good for markets, and what's good for us. I love having you here. We're going to do more and more and more of these. So share the content, share the channel, tell everyone I am here. I love seeing you. Let's keep this communication open. Write a comment. Let me know how you're doing. And we will discuss again tomorrow. In the meantime, a lot more video coming your way. I'll see you soon.